Thank you, everyone. So my talk today is about future of Australia digital trend and measurement issues. So the basic idea to talk about the measurement and the trends because that might create some foundation of talks for later discussion. But really the basic understanding is that in terms of measuring or managing the digital economy, from policy point of view, you cannot actually manage anything if you cannot measure that. So how do we measure the digital economy? What is the shape of Australia's digital economy, particularly the trade and export? That is the essence of my talk today. So these are some facts of Australia's trade. The trade is about, in 2017-18, is about 43% of Australian GDP. It's 0.8 trillion in terms of Australian dollar. And if we see export and import, is about 50% and 50% share in Australian trade. My talk will basically be on export, but we will cover import time to time. So if we see about the export, the goods export is about 78%, and services export is the rest. And in terms of import, this is almost same, 76% goods imports and 24% services imports for Australia. About 50% of Australian trade is mineral products, and top 10 constitutes iron ore, which is about 15.2%, coal 15%, and we also have some service education related travel services, which is 8%, and obviously some other mineral products including natural gas, gold, aluminum, beef, crude petroleum, and copper. Beef coming from the agricultural export. So this is the structure of Australia's trade in terms of the aggregate picture. So if we see this long-term pattern of the trade, so I am putting export there in order to focus export in my subsequent slides. But exports, is about 50% of the trade, and it goes. If we see the long-term trend for last 44 years, what we can actually see that the trade is closely aligned to the Australian GDP, and in fact, it has been the top influencer of Australian GDP for decades. Basically, very close alignment of Australian export and Australian GDP as a whole. So this is a long-term trend. However, if we see the growth of export, what we can see here, even the absolute figure increased, we can see that the growth of trade actually declined substantially over the period of time, growth of export over the period of time. And the coefficient value, this is just very basic regression, what I always do as part of my role as a data scientist. So very basic Excel-based regression, we shows that the coefficient comes with negative, and is showing a declining pattern of the growth, as you can see. Not only that, if you see the present trend, especially in 2020s, you can observe the volatility of Australian export. Obviously, the global the prices in the global market has been very volatile during the period of financial crisis and so forth. But if you see the overall volatility, this is really alarming. This volatility means that the Australian trade is actually less resilient than before, and also we need to think about how can actually we follow a more stable path of trade in the future, because the trade is closely aligned with Australian GDP. The trade and export is closely aligned with Australian well-being of Australian citizens. So really it's about thinking the future trend of the trend. So some sorts of structural change is required. And we know that the digital economy actually provides a lot of opportunities. And from the talk from the chief executive of Australia, the Queensland Trade and Commerce, Paul Martin, we know that the government is doing a lot of things to improve the trade and the global footprint, especially how companies can use actually technology, emerging technologies, robotics, smart technology to reach the global markets. So what we can see here, like the Australia really have a very good footprint of digital economy. So 85% of Australians are connected to the internet, and around 12.1 million Aussies are on social media in 2017. We know that about 95% businesses are having internet access in 2017. That might be 100% now. And with 59.3 of them place order online, and about 37% receive orders online. We know that the Australian e-commerce market is growing at a rapid pace. Is growing and is predicted to increase by 27 billion by 2023. And online shopping indeed in Australia is growing at a rapid pace at 10% each year. And 80% of the online shopping is happening in the domestic market and about 20% international. So we really need to have a very good footing of the digital economy. Now, this is the chart showing the e-commerce revenue of Australia in terms of the global computer. And this chart is, the source is not there, but not shown clearly, but it is the Statista. They provide the data. And if we see the top 5, and Australia is actually 6th place in terms of the e-commerce revenue, and which is $21,000 US dollar in million. So yeah, it's really pretty good, even though it's significantly lower than many other countries. But given the size of our population and the economy, it's a pretty good number, and the e-commerce is growing in Australia. But there is a paradox. So I am talking mostly about that paradox. What is the paradox? So you can see digital everywhere. You can see a smartphone everywhere. You can see internet everywhere. You can see digital in government policy, trade policy, and so forth, but not in Australian official statistics. So that's the paradox. And what does the statistics show us? So this is 2018 figure, which is our information and the telecommunication media, which is about only 1% of goods export and 4% of services exports. So this is the situation now in 2018. We cannot definitely identify the value of Australian digital trade because our official statistics do not contain that information, or we don't have that information at all, or we don't have that footprint at all. So we really need to understand what is happening in the official statistics and what is happening in Australia digital economy. So this is the chart of Australia's information and communication sector. And as you can see, the red line here is the GDP share. And this is a chart from 1990. And it went to some forms of peak in early 2000. But what we can really see, the share of GDP of the sector is actually declining over the period of time. And we have data for both constant prices and constant prices and current prices. This means that the data shows the price adjustment in the economy. So we had like about 4% share of the GDP in early 2000s, but now is declined to about less than 3%. So this is the puzzle. And what we can see, like also the growth rate of that sector has declined significantly in recent years. So this is official statistics as provided by Australian Bureau of Statistics. Whether this is a real council of the economy, we don't know, but it is the real concern for the people concerned about changes in the digital economy. So, yeah. So, this is a history of a Brisbane-based company. So, Clipchamp is one of the Brisbane-based company. What happened is that the Clipchamp actually received Premier of Queensland Export Award in 2017. And Clipchamp, what they happened, they have 4.3 million registered users, and 95% of the Clipchamp customers are coming from outside Australia. They provide patent protected in browser video production technology, Slack, which has been sold in international brands such as Snapchat, McDonald's, Nick, ESPN, New York Times, Royal Household, Google, Volvo, and many other companies. This is the history of Brisbane-based company. So we are not sure whether even though we are celebrating this digital export, where the statistics are gone in our national aggregates. So that's one concern. So there are many others. Indeed, if you just Google it, the technology, media, and communication companies in Australia, and from the talk of Paul Martin from this morning, you know that is grown by multiple. Like knowledge-based companies increased by 40% or so. These are the few companies from Brisbane. So I was just Googling quickly last night, and I saw like there are hundreds of companies are emerging in the media and telecommunication sector and in the digital sector, and they are putting footprint in the global market. Now, we see that there is a boom. So these are some unofficial statistics, not from Australian Bureau of Statistics, but we see a boom of growth of Australian information and technology workforce. We see a boom of some unofficial statistics suggesting that the contribution of the digital economy will be 139 billion in 2020. Whether these forecasts are correct or not, true or not, we don't know, because we don't have any measure, anything from Australian, any regional government, any state government, or even from the national government. So let's probably then talk about how do we actually measure this digital trade. So this is where the intervention is required. So there are some handbooks, very recent handbooks from OECD and other countries, other international organizations, and they say that the digital trade is about the digital order, cross-border e-commerce, digitally facilitated by third-party platform and or digitally delivered. So this is the definition of digital trade according to that handbook that is very popular to the government level. The Australian Government Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, they define a little bit in terms of a little bit broader, they take a little bit broader definition, say okay, this is not only the buying and selling of goods and services, but also transmission of the data across border. Very good. We all know that data is very important, and the data is emerging in the digital economy and is creating a lot of value chain. We will discuss this very soon. So my understanding is that even though these definitions are very good, they are truly old school definition and cannot actually capture the momentum of the digital economy. So there are some fundamental problem in the definition. So I am highlighting these things now. First of all, digital trade is not e-commerce. E-commerce, also known as electronic commerce, and is originated like about 60 years back. Nowadays, this is a hygiene factor. Every international trade, when any organization go to the international market, they have that e-commerce. So this is some kind of hygiene factor. And they have some attribute of internet, buying, selling, or interchange of electronic data. How do we measure that? This is the next step. But the digital trade essentially is not actually e-commerce, even though the definition say digital trade is e-commerce. In some agencies like international agencies, they say, okay, digital trade is actually synonym of e-commerce. So when you talk about digital trade, this is same as e-commerce, but this is not. E-commerce can be part of digital trade, but digital trade is more broader than e-commerce. Secondly, the distinction between digitally facilitated and digitally ordered is not clear. I will provide some example on that. But what about this, like the chatbot? So this is a chatbot. Our team is currently on file, and global chatbot market is about 190 million in 2016. 44% in a recent survey for in UK, they found that 44% actually consumers pay for chatbot over human customer service representative. So how do we capture that value in our national statistics? It is a big challenge. Now this is a story of a company called Schaeffler. Schaeffler is a company, German company, which entered the Australian market in 1960. So this interesting is very important and provide a very good understanding of how we define digital export. So Schaeffler had market over 50 companies. I think they have subsidiaries over 50 countries of the world, and they are a very good, very big exporter. So about 50 years back, where Schaeffler started, they started with a product which is purely non-digital. So, and then they moved to the product which is purely digital, and let's see if the video works. Oh, no. I'm not sure. Video is not working, sorry. So basically there has been a shift for that company. They are very much a traditional bearing manufacturing company. They moved to the mobility market, where they are using smart sensor, the robotics to qualify the quality of the product. Okay, so now the movement is that they are moving from a product to a product which has the data embedded in the product, and they can actually fix the product from remotely. They can monitor the product remotely, and they can improve the performance of the product remotely anywhere. So that's Schaeffler, and this company generated a huge amount of I think the Schaeffler revenue is about 15 billion. So that's a very good company. But their journey towards that digital product or digitally enabled product is quite fascinating. The reason is that they started with very traditional product. Now every product they produce the supply which has digital embedded to that. So even though they are supplying bearings, it's not the bearings, it's the technology, it's the data, is the support of the service they are providing along with that bearing. So this means that the digital is an enabler, and we have to somehow capture that in our trade statistics. So but moreover, the true value of the value addition is not only the technology, it's all about the vision of the organization, the leadership of the organization, innovation of the organization. Schaeffler actually did a lot of innovation over the past 50 years and so. So it's innovation of the company. So digital trade actually should reflect that organizational approach when we measure. So when Schaeffler exports bearing, it's not the bearing. We have to capture how much of this bearing is actually enable by digital technology. Okay, so that measurement is missing. So this is a kind of the framework we developed last year. That is the digital maturity framework. So what this framework mean in terms of the measuring of the digital economy? So in the digital economy, really you can have two indicators. One is that the capability indicators, another is the digital impact indicators. Okay? So the capability indicators, you can have like technology infrastructure, you can have talent and skills in the organization, you can have good strategy and so forth. But in order to leverage the opportunity, in order to create the impact, you really need to have some other things, which is really organizational. So in order to measure the digital trade, the organization, the micro unit, need to be measured in a way that it is trading is not is creating the value addition, but the value addition is coming from different attributes of the organization. So that part needs to be considered. So if we see the global estimates, 50% of the traded service are enabled by information and communication technology, right? So when you talk about the service, is 50% digital. We need to capture that in our national statistics. For services in USA, the digital enabling share is 63%. E-commerce share, when you talk about e-commerce, is only 12%. It's only 12%, but the other part for the goods trend, there are other attributes of the digital. Okay, that digital could be the innovation behavior of the company. That could be the new product. That could be the sensor. That could be the data and other things. So these things needs to be captured. Cross-border trade today of the economy is truly supported by the global data flows. This is important. So we need to understand the measure of the data, how data flows in the digital economy. Flows in the digital economy, we need to measure that. And machine-generated data is seen to contribute up to projected to 50 folds by next few years. So we know that the internet trade is also extending and is increasing at a rapid pace. So here is kind of the framework how we can actually measure digital trade or digital export. So if we think about the flow of goods could be Australian dollar 0.61 trillion. Okay, this is flow of goods. And we have flow of service. This is the service. So if we think about the company, so they have like goods or the economy as a whole, Australia has flow of goods, flow of service, but we have missing information about the flow of the data. What is more importantly missing is the digital intensity, which is essentially the technology intensity and the impact intensity, which is not measured in Australia. And this is why we don't see kind of comprehensive picture of Australian digital economy. We don't see the numbers where the digital economy is growing. We fail to measure that, so that there are problems of measuring that. This has huge implication to the market access. This has huge implication to the capability development. If we cannot measure that properly, we cannot actually understand the digital economy. So this is kind of ad hoc framework we are developing at this moment, and we are trying to come up with a number that actually say, okay, this is much. But it could be the flow of data. Some statistics that show that the flow of the value addition from the data could be actually 5 times larger than the flow of goods and services for an economy. So like if the goods and services we provide 10 million, the data value could be 50 million. Without data, the goods will not have any qualification to export in the global market. So the data, the digital footprint is very important. So this is one of the study we did last year with Enterprise Research Center at UK. So we analyzed data for about 10,000 firms for a couple of years. And this part of analysis, I think, is about 2,500 UK firms. It's part of a large project. And where we found that, okay, if we see the coefficient value, the IT skills and business has own website, these are the true contributor, but also the international trade. So the international trade coefficient here is 0.18, which is actually highest among other coefficient, which means that when businesses have that digital skills and when businesses have that footprint to the global market, they can actually contribute to the economy more, and they can be more productive. So the dependent variable here is the labor productivity, so that there can be more productivity. And we all know the productivity issue in Australia is declining in recent years. So it's about the skills, it's about the creating the global footprint and boosting international trade. So that's all about my talk today, and thank you very much.